I want to just talk about the active shoulder for a second, because the active shoulder gets a little bit confused for some athletes. Anytime you just press the ear into the shoulder, this is not an active shoulder. This is not a shoulder that's supported. The kind of active pressing rib cage down still doesn't kind of consummate the kind of complexity of the movement. If we're thinking about what the kind of ultimately a good snatch receiving position or a gymnast reaching up and tall, there's an element of rotation that happens through that whole arm and system. And that torque helps me to set up and get tight. Remember, in this pattern, we went from here to this externally rotated position. This would ultimately be the kind of consummation or end range of peak external rotation support. And you'll notice what happens is that this muscle, when I cue it with good positioning, pulls the scapula forward. And so that's serratus working with a force couple of the external of the trapezius. Does it matter? No. What we know is that I need to see the armpit. What are the best coaching cues for Olympic lifters? We need to see the armpit. How does Bergner coach? I want to see the armpit exposed up and through. And that position represents kind of those corners of where we were trying to hit. If that shoulder is forward and up, and that's the problem, if we see up positioning, then I tend to internally rotate the shoulder, and that's not a very strong position. It's certainly a functional position, a position that works, and we've seen it happen a lot. But as soon as the weights become significant enough, you're going to have to see the turnover of that corner and up. And that's our active shoulder position. So however we cue it, with armpit up and then active, now I'm supporting. And what is the active shoulder? The only position where you can hold 400 pounds over your head, right? Every other discussion is moot. Any gymnast is open is going to be open here. They're not going to be shrugging into the ear here. Does that make sense? This is a compromise we see when people don't have the range to come over. They'll internally rotate. And what happens to my arm as I internally rotate? As my shoulder comes forward, do you see how my arm has gone further back? And so maybe it looks like I've solved a mechanical problem by spinning the system, right? So now, oh look, it's the same thing as me pulling here if I have the range. All I've done is rotate, but I've really exposed my shoulder to some hotness in the front of the socket, because that shoulder now has to be solely stabilized kind of in a bad position. Does that make sense? So we really need to finish that. So when we hear people say this is the active shoulder doesn't work, I'm like, if this is your active shoulder, you bet it doesn't work. That's not what we're coaching. We're coaching full opening of the armpit.